presented by the Strong Blue Line Foundation and powered by Moose Ridge Coffee in Snake River Landing, Idaho Falls. Welcome to the podcast, where former San Antonio police officer, author, and pastor Tim Rupp walks you through real-life scenarios involving our police officers and digs into the depths of facts and opinions on each case. This is Cop Talk, and it starts now.
Hi, and welcome to Strong Blue Line's Cop Talk. I'm Tim Rupp in the Rev.FM studio in beautiful Idaho Falls. Here with me is station manager Gary Austin. Hello, Gary.
Hello, Tim. How's it going?
Things are going well, man. We're getting through. It's starting to cool off a little bit.
It is.
Last weekend, church in the park.
Yeah.
It was an amazing thing. 100 or so baptisms.
Great. Yeah.
And just great time.
Yeah, sure is. That's one of my favorites.
It was warm.
It was warm.
It is August.
Yes.
And it will be cool before I know it.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a pastor's meeting a couple weeks ago, and one of the pastors said, well, thank the Lord for the heat because it's going to be snowing soon. And that's true. So
that is true.
Hey, enjoy it while it's here.
I love the four seasons anyway.
Yes.
So we're good.
Yep, we're good. We're good to go. Another thing I want to tell you, Gary, a couple weeks ago, I was at the Falls Church. I spoke over there.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Sherry and I presented the Strong Blue Line ministry. It went really well. I preached. And when I got done, I was talking to a gentleman there, and he's a truck driver. And he says, I hear you on the Rev. I hear Cop Talk. I said, really? I said, well, good.
That's cool.
So he said he enjoyed the show.
Good.
I told him.
I love it.
We have a good time doing it. So
hello then.
That's encouraging.
Yes.
Yes. So
that's awesome.
We thank you for our truckers that are out there listening in, and
yeah,
that was encouraging.
So
I think we got some interesting stuff this week
really
and next.
do. Yeah.
We got some stuff coming up. So, but before we do, we're going to want to do our Officer Down Memorial page, give honor to officers who have died in the line of duty on this date in history. And so I have one here, Gary, Under Sheriff Osmond N. Steele. Undersheriff. You know what an undersheriff is?
No.
That's the guy that works under the sheriff.
Oh, really?
He would be like the number 2 guy in charge. Yeah, it's kind of a strange.
Oh.
We still have undersheriffs today, but it's not as it has changed to chief deputy or something like that.
Oh,
but
I see.
So there is still undersheriffs. Anyways, this was in Delaware County Sheriff's Office, New York. End of watch Thursday, August 7th, 1845.
Oh my goodness.
As they say in New York, this was a minute ago.
New York minute, yeah.
Yeah. So it says Under Sheriff Osmond Steele, the county sheriff, so his boss was there, a lawyer, and a town constable were in the town of Andes, where they were attempting to sell property that had been levied. When they arrived, there were several spectators around the property. I imagine these spectators were wanting to bid on the property.
Sure.
They were going to. And the man who once owned the property refused to allow any of the officers onto the property. We can see a confrontation coming.
Uh-huh.
This gets interesting, Gary. As the officers attempted to settle the matter, a large group of citizens dressed as Indians appeared. The lawyer attempted to push through the group so he can enter the property in question. The Indians, well, actually, it's those dressed as Indians, opened fire at the officers. Now, remember, this is 1845. They were using muzzle loaders.
Yes, that's right. That's true.
Under Sheriff Steele was struck 3 times. He died several hours later from his wounds. Yeah, terrible tragedy. Several suspects were arrested and charged with Under Sheriff Steele's murder. In October of 1845, so about a couple months later, 2 were sentenced to death, 3 were sentenced to life, and several others received lesser sentences. A month later, the 2 death sentences were commuted to life. You realize in 1845 there was a murder, and they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and several others were released, but that the whole process took 2 monts.
Oh my goodness!
And it was done.
Wow.
Nowadays it'd be years.
Yeah,
or something like that.
Right.
Happened. Anyways, Under Sheriff Steele was survived by his wife, 35 years old.
Oh my goodness!
So that's a tragedy, but that's so. Got dressed as Indians.
Yeah, it really does. And there's a lot of information for
Yeah, it is.
1845. So
Yeah, it is. And what do you have there, Gary?
that's good. So I've got police officer Jonah Oswald, Fairway Police Department, Kansas, end of watch, 2023.
So 1 year ago.
So 1 year ago, the Lenexa police responded to reports of a stolen vehicle in Mission, Kansas. And as they attempted to apprehend the subjects, the male and female fled, hitting one of the Lenexa patrol vehicles. Officers from neighboring agencies, including the Fairway Police Department, assisted in the pursuit, and the subjects ended up crashing and ran into a convenience store. Officer Oswald and other officers entered the store, and when officers attempted to arrest the subjects is when gunfire broke out. Officer Oswald was critically injured and transported to the hospital, where he later succumbed to his injuries the next day. The male subject was shot and killed, while the female subject was taken into custody and charged with first-degree murder, that must be.
Mm-hmm.
So Officer Oswald, he was a U.S. Army Reserve veteran who had served with the Fairway Police Department for 4 years and previously served with the Buckner Police Department, survived by his wife and 2 children, 29 years old.
29. So, yeah, that's too bad. Just a year ago.
Yep. Again, going right into danger.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, we talked about that. That's what policemen do. They do these things. They just go in there.
They really do.
So I found this article and I was intrigued. This came from an article off Lexipool. Now we've pulled articles off Lexipool before, not too often, but it's really a website for police officers. That's what's for, and for police agencies and stuff. But this has to do with qualified immunity, Gary. And I thought that was interesting because a few weeks ago I was listening to some reporters interviewing former President Trump, and they asked him about immunity. And when they said, well, do you believe that officers should have immunity? And he said yes. And they said, why do you believe that officers should be able to get away with anything just because they're police officers? And the former president really didn't answer the question. I don't think somebody didn't brief him properly on what's qualified immunity and what is absolute immunity from when it comes to the law.
Yeah.
And there's a huge difference. And this article is going to talk about that a little bit, but I want to clear it up what the difference is, Gary. Qualified immunity, that doesn't mean absolute immunity. Of course, the term immunity, referring to law, means that you do something, you're immune from the law. Kind of like foreign diplomats. If a foreign diplomat is here, they have immunity from the law. So if a policeman pulls them over, they really can't give them a ticket because they're immune.
Right.
From our law. So, and under certain circumstances and all that kind of stuff. Police officers enjoy qualified immunity when they are acting under the color of law. And what that means, Gary, is when they're doing their job legally. And so if a police officer, let me use an example. If a police officer gets called to a house and they say, there's somebody in the house and he's beating up his wife or something, and you better hurry, come right now, he's going to kill her. And the officers come and they break the door down and go in and they find it was a false call and nothing happened. Well, they just broke into somebody's house. So that's illegal.
Sure.
However, because they were acting under the color of law, because they were acting within their duties, they would be required to do that. And it's reasonable for an officer to do that in his duties to break in. They would enjoy qualified immunity, so they couldn't be charged with breaking and entering. That's an example of that.
Oh, okay.
But if that same officer that was on duty and he's just driving around and he decides, I'm going to go break into that house and steal something because I know nobody's home, he doesn't get immunity for that. He's acting outside the color of law. So that's kind of the important things here. And so, but the title of this article is, It Takes Time to Start Force, It Takes Time to Stop Force. And I thought it was a very well-written article. And this comes out of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, Brummett versus Smith, 2024 case. And it says here, Sergeant Sam Smith of the Evansville Police Department saw Charles Brummett sprawled over a utility box in the parking lot of a bar at 3 o'clock in the morning. After stopping his car, Smith got out to check on Brumit's well-being to see if he had any outstanding arrest warrants. So that makes sense. An officer's driving around 3 o'clock in the morning. You see a guy passed out or something, you're going to check on him.
Right.
Make sure he's okay.
Absolutely.
Make sure he's not, if he needs medical attention or if he's got warrants or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The sergeant asked Brumit if he was okay, and Brumit mumbled, "No," and stopped talking. Smith identified himself as a police officer and said that he wanted to make sure that Brumit was okay. So why do you suppose Smith identified himself as a police officer? He was in uniform. He had a patrol car.
Mm-hmm.
But if this guy was intoxicated, he wanted to make sure that he understood you're dealing with a policeman here.
Right.
Because let me tell you what happened, Gary. I've woken up drunks in my life as a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this one guy for sure. He woke up and took a swing at me. and he didn't know. He just woke up out of a stupor. So you just got to be careful when you're waking somebody up.
Mm-hmm.
But so he identified himself. Let me continue on. Brumit mumbled that he could be passed out wherever he wants. When Smith responded that he could take Brumit to jail, Brumit said, "Take me, blankety blank, take me." Smith thought that he saw a card sticking out of Brumit's pocket that might have provided identification. In other words, he thought he saw a driver's license or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Telling Brumit, "Let's see your ID." Smith reached for the card. Brumit began to get up, and he said, "Don't you reach in my blankety blank." He cusses some more at him and stuff. I'm not going to say what he said on air. Brumit struck the sergeant in the face and said, "Get the blankety blank off me, blankety blank blank." The sucker punch momentarily disoriented Smith. So out of nowhere, this guy Brumit strikes the officer in the face. Now, he stops the article there, and he talks about Colonel John Boyd developing the OODA loop. And the OODA loop, Gary, I think we've talked about it before. Maybe
we have,
about a year ago or so. The OODA loop is OODA, and it stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. It's a loop or a cycle based on his experience as a fighter pilot. This is Colonel Boyd who developed this thing. The OODA loop model posts that law enforcement officers and suspect make decisions in a dynamic situation through observing circumstances, orientating them to the perceived threat, and forming a mental image of the unfolding circumstances, deciding on the action, and then executing the selected action. So what they're saying, Gary, is let's pretend you're the drunk passed out, and I just woke you up, and I'm the police officer, and as a police officer, I'm trying to figure out what to do. Are you a threat to me? Are you not a threat to me? I'm
Right.
watching your hands. I'm saying, you as a suspect, you're thinking, what am I going to do? Am I going to try to get away from this guy? Am I going to fight him? Am I going to act like I'm, whatever, and so you orientate yourself to what you think and I'm doing the same thing. And then when you strike at me like you punch, see, I didn't expect that coming. And then I have to respond to that. I respond.
Okay.
So that's that OODA loop.
Okay.
And that's what he's talking about. And it says, then it goes back, the writer here goes back to the narrative. Though it took a nanosecond for Sergeant Smith to enter and execute his own OODA loop, Smith grabbed Brumit's shirt and punched his face 4 times over at the most 4 seconds. So remember what happened. Brumit's the drunk, and he sucker punches the sergeant in the face.
Mm-hmm.
The sergeant grabs him by the shirt and punches him 4 times. That fast. Boom.
Right.
It said no more than 4 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And when I just hit my hand 4 times, that was much less than 4 seconds. That
Right.
probably took about a second or second and a half.
Yeah.
Very, very quick. And so, what's the issue? Smith described his response as purely instinctual, and likely based on his martial arts training. The officer possesses multiple black belts. So this officer is trained beyond the regular police officer. He's a black belt.
Right.
Sometime during those 4 seconds or less, Brummett lost consciousness. However, the officer did not recognize that Brummett was unconscious until after the fourth and final punch. Brummett had a fractured eye, broken nose, and deep lacerations on his face.
Wow.
Okay. So basically what happened, Gary, is this guy was passed out drunk. The officer woke him up, said, "Are you okay? Blank and blank, get away from me," cussing at him and stuff. "Hey, I'm a police officer. I need to ID you. Let me see your ID." The guy said no and hit him in the face.
Mm-hmm.
The officer responded by grabbing him and punching him 4 times real quick.
Yeah.
Now, this guy, the bad guy, is suing the officer because you hit me too many times. You only need to hit me once or maybe twice. What the officer is saying is, hey, I can't stop the force immediately.
Mm-hmm.
It takes your mind more than 4 seconds or a fraction of that time to realize that, oh, you're passed out.
Mm-hmm.
I can testify this personally, Gary. I think I told you this before. I was on a call with an officer. He was a young officer. I was a sergeant, so he was a little bit intimidated by me being in there anyways. He didn't know me. He just knew I was a sergeant, the man with the stripes. And we go to arrest somebody, and I'm fighting with him, and I tell the officer, I said, "Casey, hit him." And the officer hit me in the face, in the temple several times, like boom, boom, boom. And I almost went out. And I said, "Not me, him." So he just responded, and he responded out of his training. He trained in the martial arts, but his focus was on me so much he just hit me, and it was not intentional. Obviously, he didn't intend to hit me.
Right.
But so I can relate to this, to what's going on. You cannot stop the force immediately.
Right,
It takes a
right.
minute. You say, well, if the officer was that quick, why didn't he stop the punch? You can't. It's too quick because action always beats reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So he's reacting. So they sued. They tried to sue the officer under Section 42 U.S. Code 1983, which is a civil rights violation. In other words, you violated my civil rights by using too much force. He said that the officer's force was, quote, grossly disproportionate to subdue the drunk Brummett and needlessly continued to use the force after he was unconscious. The sergeant asked the trial court for summary judgment. And what summary judgment means, Gary, is he asked the judge, "Hey, can you just decide this outside of a jury and just decide this?" And he argued that his force was reasonable and he was entitled to qualified immunity because no clearly established precedent put him on notice that his actions were unlawful. In other words, the sergeant's saying, "Hey, I didn't do anything illegal.
Right.
He hit
Reasonable.
me. I responded in force." What the bad guy is saying is that, yeah, but you overdid it. You did. One would have been good enough. And he's saying, hey, it happened too quick.
Mm-hmm.
The trial court denied the request for qualified immunity.
Wow.
Yeah, ruling a jury could decide the officer's force was unreasonable because Brummett was drunk, drowsy, and uncoordinated. Drunk, drowsy, and uncoordinated. He punched the officer in the face and almost knocked him out.
Mm-hmm.
You imagine if he would have knocked the officer out?
Exactly.
He could have got the officer's gun.
Yep.
Or just taken off in his car or whatever.
Yep.
The trial judge also stated a jury could also find that a reasonable officer would have perceived him as unconscious and had time to recalibrate his use of force before the fourth and final blow of the force within the 4 seconds. You know what? I think the judge here is passing the buck.
I do too.
Make a decision, Judge. I mean, if the facts are laid out like we have them here, I think it's pretty clear. I mean, if the officer was never hit, then that would have been a totally different thing.
Absolutely.
If he would have said, well, I just thought he was going to hit me, so I hit him 4 times. Okay,
That's
no.
not right.
Yeah, that's something, let a jury decide that.
Yep, I agree. The judge here in this case did pass the buck, saying, I'm going to let a jury decide instead of making that decision myself. That's,
And I think judges, for the most part, should let jury decide a lot of things. Because let them do it. We're able to. But judges also have responsibility to look at the law, to look at things. Judges see police officers and bad guys all the time, and they get to feel, what's going on the streets.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
On appeal, Sergeant Smith argued that the trial judge wrongly assumed that clearly established law requires reasonable police standards or reasonable police officers to repeatedly reconsider the use of force through an encounter lasting only a few seconds to guarantee that officers know how to react to precise moment that the suspect becomes unconscious. And Gary, I can relate to that because like I've told you before on here, when I was involved in my shooting, I shot the bad guy 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
I shot 4 times. I hit him 3 times. The first 3 times I hit him, the very first shot the gun out of his hand. So why did I keep on shooting? Because in my mind, the perceived threat was still there. I did not know I did that. Had I have known and been conscious of that, I wouldn't have shot again. Mm-hmm. But I did not know that.
Right.
So, I mean, if this judge was, oh my goodness, where would I be?
Yeah, exactly.
Applying the facts in light of the most favorable to Brunette, the appellate court noted that as the officer approached an apparently drunk Brunette, the officer asked whether he was okay and asked for identification. In response, Brunette dared the officer to take him into jail just before punching the officer in the face. The court acknowledged the officer delivered 4 quick punches in 4 seconds. Force that the court characterized as substantial. The court assumed the officer could have interrupted his punches and seen that Brunette appeared limp. Notwithstanding those facts, the appellate court held that it would need to assume a reasonable officer would not know instantaneously that Brunette was unconscious and react accordingly within 4 seconds. Well, good for the Court of Appeals.
Yeah.
Brunette failed to cite any case establishing that an officer must cease the use of force in precise second the suspect acquiesces. The Court of Appeals restated the clearly established principle that an officer should not continue using force after suspect is subdued, which is true. Mm-hmm. You know, once he's subdued, you got him handcuffed or he's in custody or he's compliant, okay, the force ends.
Right.
Though an officer's force should be proportionate to the suspect's threat, which is agreeable.
Mm-hmm.
Brunette failed to cite cases notifying an officer that 4 seconds punches a suspect unprovoked blow to an officer's face disproportionate blow. Moreover, the no case clearly established that a reasonable officer must recess his force that quickly. So that's the end of it. That's pretty good. And then the writer of the article, who's this gentleman's name? I think he's retired chief of police, Ken Wallentine. He says this: takeaways for the suspect. Don't sucker punch a cop who's trying to be helpful. And if you do, don't let it be a cop with multiple black belts. The takeaway for the officers. Remember that when an officer has sufficient time to comprehend that a suspect was subdued, continued force is unreasonable. Even so, officers are entitled to reasonable leeway to permit them to perceive that the threat level has diminished.
I'll be darned. Well, I see a couple things there too, Tim, that as a black belt or several, the officer possessed multiple black belts. I would think that, the officer could have done several different things. And he probably could have killed him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was a black belt.
Yeah.
He didn't, but he also didn't, keep him.
Didn't choke him out.
Didn't choke him out. And
the officer, and let's go. This guy's a black belt. He's an officer. He's in the moment.
Yeah.
And yet he still got hit in the face.
Exactly.
So by some guy that's half drunk.
Yeah.
So. You just got to be careful. I told you when I woke up that guy, he didn't hit me. He swung at me, but I was trained. Use your night baton or your flashlight and rub their ribs and stand back.
Oh,
and that's what I was doing. And he come up and he went to hit me, and actually I hit him with he ended up hitting my flashlight.
Oh my goodness!
His hand came up and I boom. What'd you hit me for? So why'd you hit me? Oh, sorry, man. I didn't know you were a cop. And, it was good. I just booked him for drunk or something.
Right.
I didn't book him for assault.
Yeah.
I could have booked him for an assault or an attempted assault on an officer, but why?
Yeah.
He was drunk and he woke up and he thought somebody was rolling him for his money or something.
Well, even just being woken up. Is, you can get startled
with a start. Yeah.
So that does make sense. But that's good.
Anyways, we're out of time, Gary.
Man, that went fast.
It did. That was an interesting. I really like that. Thanks for listening in. If you have a topic or question you want to address on Cop Talk, maybe you come across an article like this, send it in to us.
Yes.
We'll give you our professional or maybe unprofessional opinion. You can email suggestions, questions, comments, or complaints to coptalk@therev.fm. Coptalk@therev.fm. Just drop us a line. Let us know you're listening, if you would. Thought from the good book today. Let me try that again. Thought from the good book today. Doing wrong is like a joke to a fool, but wisdom is pleasure to a man of understanding. Thank you for joining, and help us to make the thin blue line a strong blue line.
Cop Talk is presented by the Strong Blue Line Foundation and sponsored by Moose Ridge Coffee in Snake River Landing, Idaho Falls. Questions and comments are always welcome by email to coptalk@therev.fm. Listen, follow, leave a review, and share this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or YouTube. And visit thestrongblueline.org to learn how you can be a supporter. Cop Talk is a Rev FM production, produced and edited by Gary Austin. Thank you for joining us on Cop Talk.